Good evening, Council. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order? Deputy Cabral, Councillor Moore, that the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of January 18th, 2023 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Council, at this time, we are going to sing our national anthem. If you can please rise. Oh, Canada, our home land, true and love, in all sun's name. Its glory mighty see, as the true Lord strong and free. From far and wide Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our glory once and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. And Council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? And seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder to call the public meeting to order? Councillors Fisher and Garwood. That the public meeting of the council held under section 7 of the, am I on the right? Yes, I am. Of the building code for amendments to bylaw 2022-005 and schedule C of bylaw 2018-033 respecting fees for building permits and miscellaneous fees be called to order at 6:32 p.m. All those in favor? And that is carried. Welcome to this public meeting for the Township of Springwater Council, held in compliance with Section 7 of the Building Code Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views regarding the proposed amendments and fees for building permits and miscellaneous fees. The first part of the meeting is to present the amendments to the fees for building permits. Following, the public will be given an opportunity to make an oral submission in person or virtually through Zoom. Any person wishing to make an oral submission must have notified the township prior to 8:30 a.m. this morning and must have been added to the commenters list. All comments or questions should have been addressed through the chair. Don't I have to ask you? Clerk Ainsworth, were there any oral submissions or written submissions, sorry?
Thank you. There have been no submissions received for this public meeting.
I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates in which a notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was published in the December 22nd, 2022 Springwater Link. The notice was also placed on the township's website on December 8th, 2022 and circulated throughout the township's social media accounts.
And I guess I will ask you again. Has the township received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
No correspondence was received for this public meeting.
I will now call on Sean Michael Stephen of Watson and Associate Economists Limited to give the presentation outlining the building permit fees review and suggested amendments to the building fees permit.
Thank you very much, and good evening, members of council. So the township has undertaken a comprehensive review of their user fees across multiple service areas. One of those being the building permit fees, which is the purpose of the presentation this evening and the public meeting. And so the overall objectives of the building permit fee review as part of the overall undertaking was ultimately to make fee recommendations, and doing so with regard to the legislation and making sure those fees are defensible, while also looking to balance the need to maximize cost recovery while ensuring that there is a sustainability of the delivery of the service through the maintenance of a building permit reserve fund, as well as having regard for stakeholder interests and the affordability and competitiveness of those fees. And so the methodology that's been undertaken to help inform those fees is an activity-based costing methodology that I'll speak to in a little bit more detail in a moment to assess what the full costs are of administering and enforcing the building code. And so just briefly on the legislative authority to impose fees, the Building Code Act does allow municipalities to require the payment of fees for the application issuance of building permits. What's identified in the Act is that the fees cannot exceed the anticipated reasonable cost of administering and enforcing the code, and that there is an allowance for both the direct cost of service as well as the indirect cost. And as I mentioned earlier, the Act also allows for the creation of Building Code Act reserve funds. And through our methodology and approach, we've looked at the full cost of administering and enforcing the code, not just at the code level, but continue to look at that in a bit more detail in terms of the cost of service by different types of permits that the township would receive. So the process that was undertaken, it commenced in May of last year through to presenting draft findings to staff and to council in December of 2022 before proceeding to the public meeting as required under the Building Code Act for any changes in building permit fees. And then upon conclusion of the public meeting, council then will have the opportunity in the future to approve the fee bylaw and implement the proposed building permit fees. So the methodology that has been undertaken in terms of the activity-based costing methodology, it's a similar approach has been taken not just for the building permit fees, but for the entire comprehensive user fee review that was undertaken. And in that assessment, we have looked at not only the direct cost of service, so the operating cost of the individuals directly participating in the service delivery activities, so their resource costs as well as other departmental budgeted costs, but as well as the capital asset replacement costs that are directly consumed in the delivery of those activities as well. So most notably facility space that's dedicated towards individuals who participate in those activities. And then in addition to the direct costs as allowed by the legislation, we've also accounted for the indirect costs of service. So those operating costs of the organization that are required to allow those individuals to perform those direct service activities, such as the building department and those other support functions that are required. So examples of those including council, IT, the CAO's office, HR, finance, and clerks. And so to illustrate how we've gone through that approach, starting on the right-hand side of the illustration, we've looked at the various categories of building permit review that we wanted to assess for costing purposes, as well as other categories of user fees within the overall review. And within that assessment of those categories, those are generally aligned to the types of permits that the township currently receives. We then spent considerable amount of time with staff looking at who is involved in those processes and how much time they would typically spend, not only on a per permit basis, but on an annual basis as well, and testing that level of effort to make sure that it is reasonable and reflective of current service delivery levels. And so then that annual utilization of staff who are involved in that process, so principally for building permit fees, that is the building services department, but then as well, that would also include some involvement from fire prevention staff as well in the review of those building permits. Based on that utilization of staff, that is then the driver for how the indirect support and overhead costs that are inherited by those direct service departments would also be allocated to the annual cost of administering and enforcing the code. And as highlighted on the left-hand side with the support functions and the overhead functions in the blue and orange circles, we've identified drivers for how those costs would be allocated to the direct service function. So an example of that being HR costs being allocated to the various direct service departments based on their share of full-time equivalent staff positions being a good indicator or driver of how those costs are consumed. So based on the findings of the review, the annual costs of the building permit review are about $1.6 million. As highlighted in the upper left-hand pie chart, we can see that the direct costs of service represent the majority of those costs, about 81% of those costs, about $1.3 million, with the indirect and capital costs accounting for about $305,000, the remaining 19% of those costs. Then moving down to the bottom right-hand pie chart, we're looking now at the same annual cost, but not by cost component, but rather by type of building permit that is received and reviewed within the township. And so about just over 91% of those costs do relate to residential building permit activity, with the majority of that being for new residential permits. But you can see in the orange section of the pie chart, about 33% of the annual costs do relate to minor residential permit activity for alterations to existing buildings and other minor residential permit activity. And the remaining 9% of the annual cost relates to new non-residential permits, as well as other permits for miscellaneous activities, as well as designated structures. So then, building off of that full cost assessment, the fee recommendations have been made not only to fund the anticipated costs of administering and enforcing the code in any given year, but also looking at those anticipated costs over a forecast period, in this case, looking to over a 5-year period to 2027 to fund the annual cost, but also provide for contributions to the Building Permit Reserve Fund in accordance with the Reserve Fund accumulation strategy that has been developed. And so the rationale behind the approach that most municipalities across the province use in terms of developing a reserve fund strategy is that a reserve fund is needed to be able to sustain the operations and the service capacity during economic downturns when building permit activity and therefore building permit revenues may not occur annually to fund the full cost of service. And the reason the Building Permit Reserve Fund is needed to be able to sustain that service capacity is that municipalities do have mandatory turnaround times with regards to building permits. They also have to employ certified building code officials, and that labor market is very tight. And so municipalities don't have the ability to augment their staff complement in a fluid way as building permit activity changes. And so having that Building Permit Reserve Fund does allow them to sustain that service capacity during those down periods. And so the proposed reserve fund strategy is to accumulate a multiple of 2 times the annual direct costs of service. And again, that approach being consistent with strategies used throughout the province. And so while the cost, the current building permit fees, I should say, are sufficient to fund the annual cost of service, fee increases would be recommended to maintain those revenues as the costs do increase by inflationary measures over the forecast period, and also to be able to continue to provide for those contributions to the reserve fund in accordance with that strategy. And so the fees that have been recommended have been recommended in a uniform way across all of the building permit fees, which would include a 5% increase in 2023, followed by 3% annual inflationary increases thereafter to 2027. And so it's illustrated in the graph at the bottom of the screen, shows that in the green and red lines, that the annual revenue would continue to be greater than the annual cost year over year. And that would allow the reserve fund balance to increase towards that target reserve fund multiple, as indicated by the blue line being the reserve fund balance, and the hashed orange line being that target balance. So you can see that that reserve fund balance increasing from about $2 million to just over $3 million over that 5-year period, and meeting that reserve fund multiple by the 2027 period. And what would be recommended is that the municipality over that period be continually on an annual basis monitoring those annual costs and revenues and how those might be changing year over year to see if any interim course corrections are needed, and if that reserve fund multiple is achieved earlier than what's been forecast here, interim adjustments might be needed so that further accumulation beyond what is required for service sustainability does not occur. So the detailed fee recommendations are provided in the comprehensive user fee report. I just wanted to highlight here some of the main building permit fees that are imposed with those increases. And so the majority of these fees being charged on a per square foot basis of the proposed development. And we can see that the fees for new non-residential construction going up by 5%, an increase of between 1 cent and 9 cents per square feet over the current fees. And then with the fees imposed for residential permits, which represent the majority of the building permit activity on an annual basis, we can see the fees for new residential dwellings and additions going up from $1.27 to $1.33 per square foot, and for accessory structures, an increase from 49 cents to 52 cents per square foot. But the other notable, or not notable in terms of the impact, but the other change being the minimum fee increasing just marginally from $149 to $150 for all permits. And then so the last point of comparison I wanted to highlight was in terms of the impacts of building permit fees on the overall cost of municipal development. And so we've looked at this for different development types in terms of residential, non-residential development, as well as differences in proposed development size and density of development, to give a cross section of what those impacts are of the proposed building permit fee recommendations on that overall cost of development, including municipal planning application fees, as well as municipal development charges that would be imposed for sample developments. And so it's highlighted here and presented in detail in the user fee report. We've looked at a larger, lower density development, as well as a smaller 25-unit medium density residential development, and then a smaller retail development and a much larger industrial development of 10,000 square meters. And so, again, what's presented in the detailed findings is that the building permit fees represent between about 4 to 7% of the total development fees payable. So not representing a significant share of those total fees, with development charges representing the majority of the municipal development fees. And with a 5% increase in building permit fees, that represents between about a 0.2 and 0.4% increase in the total fees payable. So the intent here is to highlight that a 5% increase represents a very nominal increase in the total fees that development would be paying and shouldn't have an impact on that development activity. So in terms of next steps, then I'm available to take any questions council might have. And council would receive input from the public on the proposed building permit fees. And as I mentioned, council would consider the bylaw for adoption and implementation.
Thank you very much, Sean Michael. Council, do any members have any questions or comment at this time? Councillor Moore and then Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Mr. Stephen.
Thank you. Just curious, because this has been in the works for some time, if Bill 23 will have an effect on our new bylaw if it's passed.
Sean Michael?
The mayor, no, there are no proposed changes to the that would impact the building permit fees specifically. I think indirectly, the only potential impact I would say is that if Bill 23 does have the intended effect that the province wants it to have in terms of more homes being built than have been and than are currently anticipated, that could result in a change in your annual costs and revenues versus what's been forecast. And as I highlighted, that would that might necessitate the township be sort of monitoring those impacts on a yearly basis, see if any course corrections are required.
Follow on, Councillor Moore?
Thank you. So they're not proposing a reduction in permit fees for commercial or industrial or residential permits?
Through the mayor, not for building permit fees.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Can I request to pull Appendix G for further discussion?
Yeah, and my apologies, I might have given you the wrong information there. So this is an opportunity to discuss it. We can get clarification. We will then move into it, and that would be at item 5 where you could just. Oh, Clerk Ainsworth would also like to comment.
Thank you through the mayor to council. So this portion of the meeting is strictly for the building fees, the public meeting for the building fees. So any questions for that specifically could be posed now. Once the public meeting is adjourned, then the motion for the fees and charges bylaw in its entirety will be tabled, and Mr. Stephen will be here as well to answer any questions based on the entire proposed bylaw.
Comment at this time, Councillor Alexander?
No, not yet.
Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just would like to know through you to Mr. Stephen. There's obviously a bit of a disparity between our commercial rates for square footage for the building permit component versus our agricultural. And seeing as Springwater Township is obviously a very rural type of township with numerous farmers engaged in agricultural activity. And I guess the question here is there anything that prevents a township from reducing a particular building permit fee and to offset that in another area of the building fee structure? And I'm only saying that because we're always looking at ways to assist our agricultural community. And I'm just wondering whether or not that is something that is doable, because in the commercial aspect, we don't know what their return on investment is going to be given whatever activity they might engage in after they build their building. But generally speaking, when it comes to the agricultural sector, there's only a specific number of things that they can generally engage in. So I'm just wondering about the potential there. There's a difference right now. I'm wondering how wide that difference could be.
Through the mayor, yeah, good question. So firstly, yes, municipalities do have the ability to cross-subsidize the recovery of the cost through the different permit types. That's something that occurs quite commonly in all municipalities in their building permit fees, and occurs currently within the township as well. The most common example of that is for minor residential permits for things like decks. No municipality in Ontario charges the full cost of that permit because they wouldn't see one again. And they want to make sure that the permit fees allow for some level of cost recovery, as well as encouraging compliance with the building code. And so similarly with your agricultural permit fees being less than for other residential types, there is already some cross subsidy occurring there. However, municipalities do have fairly wide, fairly broad abilities to increase that disparity further if they so desired. But what we did look at through this process, though, is when looking at those agricultural permit fees in comparison to your neighboring municipalities, they weren't out of line. They were generally in line or less than the agricultural permit fees that are imposed in the surrounding areas.
Thank you. Any other members with questions, comments? Okay, thank you all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the building fees review and suggested amendments, and for showing an interest in this matter. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the public meeting? Councillors Garwood and Moore, at the public meeting held under Section 7 of the Building Code Act for amendments or to bylaw 2022, 005 and Schedule C of bylaw 2018-033 respecting fees for building permits and miscellaneous fees does now adjourn at 6:55 PM. All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the report regarding the fees and charges recommended in fee structure? Councilors Fisher and Moore, that the report from the supervisor of revenue regarding the recommended fee structure dated January 18th, 2023 be received, and the proposed fees and charges bylaw be considered as part of the 2023 budget deliberation process referred to the regular meeting of council on February 15th of 2023 for consideration and approval. And at this point, I will ask council if there's any comments or amendments to the motion. Deputy Cabral.
Just clarification on the motion, Mayor Coggan, if possible, the date it's moving to, and I heard the word approved be used. Could you just repeat it one more time, please?
My apologies. Yes, it is not the first, it's the 15th. That the proposed fees and charge bylaw be considered as part of the 2023 budget deliberation process and referred to the regular meeting of council on February 15th, 2023 for consideration and approval. Understanding that we would have, if you want me to take off for consideration, that would be fine, but it was the intent to have February 15th as our final date through the budget process.
Thank you, Mayor Coggan. I guess my concern is I was going to suggest that should go over to our regular budget deliberations in case any members of council would like to see changes in that fee structure rather than wait until the date that the final budget is going to be approved, because basically what we're doing right now is we're approving it with the amounts and with the figures that currently exist in the report.
And thank you, Deputy Cabral. If there are any changes or amendments that council wish to see made to it, we can do that now. That is an opportunity for us to do that. If you would like to see it, I guess you're asking for another time after. So
Excuse me, Mayor Coggan, I'm asking for it to be put over to Friday is what I'm asking for to happen to it. Which would be, I guess, the 20th.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you through the mayor to the deputy mayor. I would recommend then that this entire motion, just a request for referral to the 20th be made and just refer the entire motion over to the 20th.
All right, so Deputy Cabral has put forward a motion to have this deferred to the 20th, Friday the 20th, and a seconder is Councillor Garwood. So that the motion would now, sorry, the amendment would be to not have it go to the 15th, that this entire is going to go to the 20th on Friday. We have a second opportunity there. So all members of council who are in favor of pulling this to Friday rather than pushing it to the 15th. I will call it again. All those in favor? And that is carried. And Clerk Ainsworth, that was deferred. So do I need to read the main motion still? And no. All right. So council, we are now moving on to number 6. I will now call upon Corey Clapperton to present a delegation regarding the crest for the Midhurst Outdoor Rink for ball hockey. Good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I saw, oh, and there's the second.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Welcome. And at this time,
So-
if you'd like to share your screen, you can proceed.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you for your time this evening. I'm joined by Janelle Bernier as well from ESSA Hockey League. And what we'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about what we do in other various communities and basically what we can hopefully do for Springwater Township. So Ontario Sports Club, formerly ESSA Hockey, was formed in 2008. We've been in business, of course, ever since. We do operate out of numerous other jurisdictions. That includes Barrie, ESSA Township, New Tecumseh, and Innisfil. So what we do is we offer ball hockey for kids of all ages, starting as young as 3 years old. We also offer adult ball hockey. We offer men's, women's, and co-ed leagues currently. In addition to that, we offer men's and women's winter and summer ice hockey. In 2022, we had over 70 teams and over 1,000 participants. We do provide our own insurance via ProLink, and the various townships and cities are named as co-insured on all of our policies. So the reason we're here today is to outline what we're proposing for Springwater. What we'd like to do is offer the same recreational ball hockey leagues for residents of Springwater and the surrounding area using the Midhurst Outdoor Rink facility. We'd like to offer the same setup as what we have in our other jurisdictions. So, kids leagues three and up, and adult leagues for men, women, and co-ed participants. Ball hockey is an affordable activity for all participants. Our leagues provide coaching and instruction, promote teamwork, camaraderie. We encourage physical exercise, all of which we feel leads to better physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And we welcome all skill levels. Our motto is actually fun for all and all for fun. So I'll hand it over to Janelle just to mention the next piece.
So what we're looking for from council tonight, we would like you to consider installing a specialized sport court flooring or equivalent. There's other companies such as Madiflex. This sport court is local, and we would like to see that installed into the Midhurst Outdoor Rink facility along with the score clock. This is a floor that's commonly used for recreational sports like basketball and ball hockey, and it is installed in the other outdoor facilities that we currently use for ball hockey. It's a non-slip surface that offers safety, better gameplay, and it even extends the ability to use the facilities in all seasons, including winter. Ice can also be applied directly over the surface for outdoor skating in the winter months, and often it creates a better ease of use for the application of the ice. Next slide, Corey. Yeah. And so we've attached a flooring quote that we received from Sport Court. This is comparable to Madiflex, which is based out of the US. And as you can see, it for the size requirements of the Midhurst, we obtained the measurements from the Parks and Rec department for Springwater, and based on those, including installation, the requirements total $61,408. And a score clock can also be obtained for, depending on size, anywhere and installed anywhere from about $8,000 to $13,000 on top of this. So we just want to thank you for your time, and we really do look forward to working with Springwater Township, and we can field any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a couple questions myself. If there was anybody from council who wanted to go first, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask though, because I am from Ward 4, which includes the Grenfell Hall and Grenfell Arena, wondering if that was on your list of options too, because you would be driving right by it, or why it wasn't considered. Yeah.
Sure, I can field that.
Clapperton?
Yeah, sure. Yes, Corey Clapperton. Yeah, thank you. So we did look at various different facilities, and we also looked at, there's one in the north part of the city, north part of Springwater as well. From a distance perspective, we feel that the Midhurst outdoor facility is the most ideal location, given the ability to get access to it. The Grenfell rink, so we have a certain, the rinks we're using now are a certain size and dimension, and they're also covered as well. The Grenfell rink, it's not quite the exact ideal size for us in terms of the width of the arena. I know that when we went and checked out that facility, it was being used for lacrosse. Lacrosse uses that facility on Thursday nights. Thursday is actually one of our busiest nights and one of the targeted nights we'd be looking to use for the facility, for approved to do that. So that was a bit of a scheduling conflict as well. And we felt that with the Grenfell rink, there's just a few different things, like there's gaps between the boards and the floor where a ball could go through. And then just the size itself. The good thing about the facility in Midhurst is it's covered, obviously, and the actual size of the rink is the ideal size for 5-on-5 ball hockey, which is typically what our participants are accustomed to. So that's why we're hoping to use that facility. So location, the facility condition, and then the size of the rink as well. So.
Follow on, Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. Two questions then. If the Grenfell Arena was your only option, would that be a consideration then? And secondly, is this the same ball hockey league that was operating at the south end of Barrie, or are you a separate entity from them?
Sure. I'll answer the first, sorry, yes, thank you. I'll answer the second question first. So no, we're not affiliated with Barrie Ball Hockey. That was operating at Ferndale and Dunlop. As I said, we've been operating out of New Tecumseh, Alliston, Barrie to a certain degree, but mainly ESSA, Innisfil, and New Tecumseh. So they were a competitor of ours, actually. So it's an interesting point you bring up because they are now no longer in operation. We've seen demand rise significantly. And there's definitely a gap in the area for recreational ball hockey. So that's where we're hoping to come in and be able to provide that to Springwater and the surrounding area. The Grenfell, to be honest, I think that ideally our choice would be to use the Midhurst location for the reasons I indicated just previously. But the issue with Grenfell is we've actually had we'd probably have a difficult time convincing teams and players to use that facility, to be honest, because of the way it's situated, the conditions of the rink and so forth. So our first choice is definitely Midhurst. I think Grenfell would be a bit of a tough sell, just to be completely honest.
Sorry, Deputy Cabral and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. A few questions, I guess, from me. I know we also have one further up north that maybe you hadn't considered in Elmville there at the Barrett Park, although it's not covered. However, the location you've chosen for me seems to indicate that you're looking for a fairly substantial response from the folks who live in Barrie itself. And Springwater does pride itself on recreational facilities, but certainly we're looking to have those recreational facilities utilized by our own residents. The other question I have for you is the amounts that were there. Are you proposing that these amounts be paid by Springwater Township, or are you suggesting that you will bring all this to Springwater Township and there'll be some agreement put in place where you'll be renting these facilities? I don't think you really made that too clear for me. And I guess at some point in time, I'm going to reach over to Councillor Phil Fisher, because he's down in that area and has involvement with that particular pavilion. And I'm wondering what they do there in the summertime now, because I don't think they're using any covering, and I'm pretty sure they play ball hockey there. So those are my questions. Where's the money coming from, and who are the clientele that you anticipate utilizing it?
Janelle or Corey?
Yep, I can take
Sure.
that.
Go for it. Yep.
So our request is for Springwater Township to cover the costs of the flooring, as we have seen with other townships where we utilize the surface. Currently, there isn't a formalized league running out of any of these centers. So that's what we propose, is we would run out of that with a safer playing surface.
And then to Councillor Fisher for comment.
So presently there is some pickleball being used in the summer at that particular facility. In terms of ball hockey, it is used, but admittedly, I've experienced both services. The ones that you've mentioned here from Sport Court Flooring are similar one, and there is a difference between the concrete and that. That being said, it is presently used on occasion for pickleball, so that would potentially interfere with that. So I did have a question though. Oh,
Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
sorry, thank you. Through you, the Sport Court flooring, you're saying it would stay down permanently. How would that affect ice skating in the winter? You said ice can be applied over top of it, but would you not have any damage to the Sport Court flooring? And presumably we would be fixing it if we bought it.
Yeah,
Sure.
so currently in Thornton. Oh, sorry. I'll take that. So just a couple of things. Pickleball can be played on the Sport Court flooring, and the lines and dimensions can be added to that without issue. And then secondly, the ice that is applied, so within as a township out of the Angus and the Thornton location, ice is applied directly on it and there is no damage to the surface. So I think the floor that's currently in has been going on 11 years and it's perfectly intact. And there's no effect on the skaters. In fact, it freezes a little quicker. It's easier to manage the ice because of the way the grids are laid out. The water falls in between and then there's a layer on top.
Follow on, Councillor Fisher.
The example you just gave, that surface where they're skating over top of it, is that a cooled surface, or is it like we just apply water and let it's nature frozen where we are?
Yeah.
So is it controlled or not?
No, it's not controlled. It's exactly that. It's just nature.
Counselor Thompson.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, is this I assume you're a for-profit business, and would this generate any revenue for the township of Springwater?
Corey or Janelle?
Yeah, I can take that one. Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So we are for profit. This would generate revenues for Springwater because in the form of rent, and that's something that we pay in our other locations. So that would have to be established with council or with Parks and Rec. Corey, go ahead.
Follow on, Counselor Thompson.
And could you just estimate what the annual revenue would be?
For this location, let me just think. Try to wrap my head around it. So if we were to anticipate, let me just.
I can take that a little bit. I think it's
Sure,
something
go for it.
I think it's something we'd have to take back because at this point we don't know the rental fees. But in terms of the expense on our side of things, the profit is minimal. We truly both do this we're business partners, but we do this out of the love of the sport. We both actually have full-time careers and we both play within the league. So people have called upon us, so to speak, to try to continue to expand. And that's really the purpose of doing this. We have numerous expenses, as you can imagine, even between insurance, website development, rental fees, and so on. So it is minimal. But in order to get numbers, we'd have to establish, we'd have to work on that to get a number.
Counselor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. This is just more of a comment on my opinion of the matter. Although I 100% am in favor of sport and leagues like this, I would find it a very hard sell for the township to be putting $65,000 plus into this arena when I personally, for the 10 plus years I've been involved in the Phelpston CRA, have asked for a roof on our rink and the township hasn't had the money, which I understand. So to me, I don't understand how I would ever justify this expense to my residents.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I had not had anybody call me up in the North End asking if they have a place to play ball hockey. And I think the reasoning behind having it in the South End isn't necessarily to support the residents of Springwater Township, I'm sorry to say. I think it's to provide opportunity for residents of Barrie to have a nearby ball hockey location to go to. It will take away from the local residents in Midhurst being able to use that facility, either just on a ad hoc, or also if somebody wanted to rent the facility and it was already boarded up. And I think too that it's a hard sell since I say nobody's contacted me looking to play ball hockey for township to spend. I'm just estimating it be in the neighborhood of $80,000 in order to support a league that's not representative necessarily of the residents of Springwater. I would like, however, to pose a question to our direct manager of Parks and Recreation with respect to the pickleball, because that is something that I know is very popular and getting more popular all the time. And the Midhurst Pavilion is one location where they do play it. Whether or not there's opportunity to see that expanded, or if that will be expanded to the South End to make utilization of that facility.
Manager Dean.
Thank you, Mayor, and through yourself to the Deputy Mayor. Can you just clarify your question, Deputy Mayor, whether we're looking to expand pickleball or more the kind of exact demand that pickleball uses that facility for currently?
Clarification.
Yep, through the mayor to Manager Dean. Basically, I know that over the last few years, it has become more and more popular. The pavilion really in the South End is one location where they can stay out of the elements. My understanding, at least from Councillor Fisher and my own observations, is they play pickleball there. And I know that it's very, very busy in the north end, and they've been looking for other facilities to play pickleball in too. And it certainly suits our aging demographics to play pickleball. So I just don't want to see us tie something up at a cost of almost $80,000 when we have our own residents that might make use of it for other purposes. So that's what I'm looking for, is what's the status of pickleball, and is it going to become more popular down the south end, something that township should be promoting?
Manager Dean?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, so pickleball definitely is popular indoors, outdoors, is played kind of indoors year round, played outdoors, obviously in the warmer months. So at the Midhurst Pavilion is currently played by a group of individuals, definitely 3 mornings a week, and it is played other times kind of ad hocly throughout the day. There also is a group that plays at Grenfell 3 times a week, again, organized 3 times a week, as well as I'm going to say more groups, but less organized throughout the other sports courts in the township. So yes, I think pickleball, as well as many other outdoor amenities that have a low cost to them, will continue to grow as we grow in the future, and as we continue to diversify throughout the township. So we are currently just implementing the start of our recreation master plan update, and that will help also gain feedback from the residents and help council and staff determine exactly what needs of facilities are in different areas of the township. So that will give us good feedback from the residents. Is there desire or a need for more pickleball specific courts, or even other activity specific courts throughout the township? So yes, the facility is currently in use through pickleball, and I believe they will continue to look for further locations, and they do appreciate the cover over their head as well.
Thank you, Manager Dean. And final comment, Councillor Fisher?
Just a comment here. Although I love the idea of year-round usage of that facility, it's it's in my ward, and I do love that. I like it when people play hockey on it, as well as pickleball in the summer. Just to comment, I mean, close to $80,000 to set up for ball hockey. It's a lot of money in my opinion, for Springwater to take on, and to concur with some other councillors. A, the cost, but B, we already see hockey users use the rink predominantly from outside of town. I ice the rink. I spend a lot of time there overseeing it. I can tell you, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen, there have been some aggressive incidences where hockey players are not sharing the ice. And often when I've been there to, help the transition at 3:30 from hockey to regular ice skating for families, many people are not, the vast majority are not from Springwater. They're coming out of Barrie. I can also tell you that residents in Ward 5, they're voicing concerns with it. So, unfortunately, I think that this may be a continuation of that problem into the summer months.
Councillor Moore?
So I just would like to, sorry, through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Mr. Clapperton. I just want to come back one more time to the Grenfell Hall, because I know now you've heard the rest of council and certainly how those folks feel. You and I know that the Grenfell Hall is sort of in the middle of nowhere particularly, so people aren't walking there, but it's massively underutilized right now. So with a few repairs, I disagree that it's really, would be very difficult for people to go there. It's 5 minutes outside of Barrie. It's close to everything. So I would ask that you reconsider using the Grenfell Hall rink. And as an extra caveat, Ward 4 does have some discretionary funds, and I would be willing to have a conversation with you about how we maybe could work together to make that happen. And I would be also looking though for, long-term commitments. And so in order to get, some of that discretionary money back. So yeah, I'm just asking that you consider that.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, we will. The one comment I was just going to make, just in response to spring water, residents using the facilities. Just as an example, when we started Thornton in 2008, Thornton is a bedroom community of Barrie. As a matter of fact, the south end of Barrie is almost in Thornton now as the city continues to grow. And we started the league there in 2008. And to this day, we still have about 75% of our participants are local residents of ESSA Township. One of the things we're not looking to bring Barrie to Springwater. What we're looking to do is establish these leagues in other satellite locations, not just Springwater, but we are, in discussions with other areas as well. And, we think there's enough demand in Springwater alone that we could hopefully successfully get some kids and adult leagues running out there. So I just wanted to make that point just on clarity, just to put that out there. So,
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, council, may I have a mover and seconder to receive the delegation from Corey and Janelle? Deputy Cabral and Councillor Moore, that the delegation from the ESSA Hockey regarding the request for the Midhurst Outdoor Rink for ball hockey be received. All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to question period. Members of the public are invited to ask questions of council and make comments regarding an item on the agenda. Questions not on the agenda will be at the discretion of the chair. Clerk Ainsworth, have there been any submissions received?
There have been no submissions received for this evening's meeting.
Thank you. And moving on to minutes, may I have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes of council? Councillors Garwood and Moore, that the minutes of the special meeting of council of December 19th, the minutes of special meeting of council December 21st, and the minutes of the regular meeting of council on December 21st. Anything to be pulled? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the action reports, please? Councillor Alexander and Thompson, does council want to pull or comment on any of these? Yep. You know what, I'm just going to read it. Okay. And is it sorry, I do have a mover and seconder. Action reports items 9.2 through 9.5. So we have temporary borrowing bylaw, 9.3 Western Mechanical, 9.4 Estates of Anton Mills, and 9.5 the road naming of D. Hickling and Thompson lands. Or any member of council wish to pull or comment? Comment on 9.3 from Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and I'm hopeful that Director Spagnol is on the line, but I just want to reach out to Director Spagnol and ask him if he might be able to bring us up to speed on what the state currently is there. I read the report. I'm satisfied that all of those conditions were met and they were concerns of council and mine as well. I also am not forgetful of the fact that there was a stop order in place at that time too. So if you could just bring us up to speed before we move on this, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you. A verbal update, Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. So basically, as far from an engineering standpoint, from an emergency services standpoint, and from the Ministry of Transportation, we do have sign-offs and confirmation that they are accepting of the execution of a site plan agreement. With respect to the orders to comply, and I guess it's the stop work orders that Deputy Mayor Cabral is speaking to, the property owner and the proponents have obeyed the stop work order, and that's to my understanding. They were doing some site, I believe, for the roof structure that was going to be placed onto the building. And I understand that they did cease work, and they are eagerly waiting for the execution of this agreement so that those orders can be removed and that they can continue on to finalize the erection of the building.
Thank you, Director Spagnol. Councillor Thompson.
Through Mayor Coughlin to Director Spagnol on 9.4, can I go to that yet?
Yeah, 9 point, if it's comment, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's my understanding that that's the first 41 lots. First question. Second question, when can we expect building permits to be issued and them starting to build?
Director Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Councillor Thompson. That is correct. It's the first 41 lots. That is the first phase of the development. That's subject to monitoring and other engineering requirements. The timing of when we can see building permits is really difficult to determine. However, the developer is close to satisfying all the conditions of approval and is eager to working towards registration. So we may see some additional site works occurring in 2024. So we could possibly see permits towards the end of 2024 or early 2025.
Thank you, Director Spagnell. Are there any other comments or questions on 9.2 through 9.5? And seeing none, that action report items 9.2 through 9.5 be received and that the recommendations therein be approved as presented. All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder for the information reports? Councilors Moore and Fisher, that reports items listed herein be received for information. 1, facility assessment update, and 2, the status of the Elmvale wastewater treatment plant reserve capacity allocation. And council, as a reminder, if you have comment, we can comment on them. However, if you choose to amend or redirect, we would need to pull it and have it moved separately. Councilor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'd like to pull number 2, please, for an amendment.
So council, we will be dealing with item number 1. So I have a mover and seconder that the report for the facilities assessment update be received as information. All those in favor? And that has carried. And council, we are now separately dealing with item number 2, which is the status of the Elmvale wastewater treatment reserve capacity allocation, to which I will need a mover and seconder to get that on the floor, please. Councilors Thompson and Deputy Cabral, that the report of the status of the Elmvale wastewater treatment plant reserve capacity allocation be received for information. Do any members of council wish to amend or pull or speak to for comment? Councilor Garwood.
So my amendment for number 2 there is that 28.5 additional equivalent units of servicing allocation be released to the Riviera Long-Term Care redevelopment at 27 Simcoe Street, site plan application SU-2022-004 for a period of 2 years, at which time any unused allocations are to be placed back into the allocation reserves.
Thank you, Councilor Garwood. And do you have a seconder for that in order to discuss with council?
I do, yes.
Councilor Thompson. Okay. The amendment is on the floor, council. It's open for discussion. Councilor Garwood, did you want to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through yourself to the rest of the council. Absolutely. I think, again, as we discussed back in December, when we had the delegation presentation from the Riviera team, this is an absolutely incredibly important project for not only the Elmvale community, but Springwater Township as a whole. So I'm excited to see this move forward in the Elmvale community, and hope the rest of council will support this allocation of additional equivalent units to be serviced.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I certainly would agree that it's important. I'm also not lost on the fact that we were also providing information that it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be our own residents that will be placed there. However, I do have a concern that we also have the Elmvale active seniors residents currently in place. So once again, I'm going to have to reach out to Director Spagnell and ask him if he might be able to provide, or it could be General Manager Ramdale, whether or not both of these 2 developments can be facilitated by the current number of or the current capacity that that's been made available or been reported on.
I'm looking for Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I would, if I'm speaking out of turn, I would refer it over to General Manager Ramdale, but it's my understanding that there is allocation available to service the first phase of the Elmville Active Seniors residence, which is, I believe it's 80 units. That was expressed to the group through pre-consultation when the ministerial zoning order was being considered by council, that there was a limit on capacity, and that at that moment we could only confirm that there would be sufficient capacity for the first 80 units of that development. There are additional studies that the municipality is going through to take a look at potential upgrades to the plant. So therefore, additional development that may come on stream, subject to timing, may be addressed through additional upgrades to the plant to increase capacity.
Follow on, Councillor Cabral.
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. I guess further to that, I'm also wondering with respect to Elmvale Village, whether or not they've already been taken care of as far as, oh, they're on a separate one there anyway, if I'm not mistaken, or they might be tied in as well. And we also have the other development that's come before council and been moving along quite nicely on off of Train Avenue, where council actually has transferred ownership of a piece of property there so that they would be able to move forward. And I really like to know how this is going to impact that too. And it's not that I don't want to see Rivera move ahead. I certainly do, but I also want to be mindful of these other projects that are in the works that have come before council already. And we've been working with them to try and get them to come to fruition.
Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. Those developments have been considered within the sewer allocation strategy. So staff are monitoring the capacity against what the, I guess, potential impact could be to those developments. It really comes down to a matter of timing as to when those developments come on stream. Because the developments come on stream at different times, there may be additional capacity in the future. But what will have to happen is allocation and capacity will have to be determined by this council upon approvals. So just stepping back just to the rationale and the setup of the sewer allocation strategy, it is set up to work on a first come first served basis. So essentially that's tied to approvals. When you look at a subdivision approval, it's tied to when a condition of approval is being cleared by staff through council, specific to sewer allocation. On site plans, it's covered when there's a site plan approval. And it's at that point that the actual allocation is provided to the developments. So recognizing that there are certain developments that are further along in the pipeline from an approval standpoint, those ones there, when they come forward, because they're moving forward and they're progressing, will be addressed and will be provided that allocation because they're coming in sooner than the other developments. So I can't provide you with, with a guarantee that they will be provided allocation. But as you stated, there has been significant work and significant progress done in that specific application, where others have sat dormant for a number of years. So it's on that basis that those applications which have not been moving forward, they should not hold up the ones or the developers that have been moving forward. So it's a little bit of balancing between developments that are progressing versus the ones that are sitting stagnant where there hasn't been any momentum to actually develop.
Thank you. And Director Bradigan, or sorry, Director, you caught me off guard there. Director Spagnell, can you refresh my memory? During the presentation from the proponent, there was indication that allocation needed to be affirmed by council. I don't want to say approved, but and if not done so, that there would be potential loss of licensing and they would not be able to move. Can you refresh us on that, please?
That is correct, Mayor Coughlin. The licensing for and I think the key here is that council does have the ability through the sewer allocation strategy to prioritize certain developments. And in this instance here, this is tied to licensing for long-term care, and it's a pre-existing use, so it's a redevelopment. It's not like they're starting from scratch. So from staff's perspective, the fact that they're moving forward, they're experienced in developing these types of facilities, they're quite far along in the site plan process. Staff is fairly confident that they're going to be moving forward to develop this site. And as I said, it's considered even in staff's minds as being one of those priority developments, just because it is a redevelopment of an existing use that's operated in the township for quite some time.
Further comment on Councillor Garwood's amendment? Oh, my apologies. Councillor Moore, I'll get right to you. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you. But basically what we're doing here is we're putting a pin on this, and I'm okay with that, but I really needed to know what the ramifications would be for these other developments that have already been coming forward. So I don't want anybody to think I'm not supportive. I certainly am. I would like to know, maybe down the road, there could be a report come before council that would give us some kind of an outline on what would need to be done to increase the capacity, so that maybe we can be in a position to provide the okay for these other developments, and not be in a position where we have to worry about capacity for them as well. Thank you.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Director Spagnell. So if I'm understanding you correctly, if we don't do anything, the chances are that Revere will be successful in obtaining their allocation in a timely manner without having to sort of let them jump the queue or secure a position when we haven't really allowed other developers to do that. And so I agree that it's a first come, first serve. Whoever is prepared first should have the allocation, but I just want you to help me out. Thanks.
Director Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through to Councillor Moore. I think to clarify, in order for Rivera to obtain the licensing to be able to move forward with the development, they need confirmation that there is sewer allocation available for the development to move forward. That is a threshold consideration that they need in order to lock down their licensing, so that as part of the development process, there's confidence that there will not be any obstacles from a servicing perspective for them to redevelop the site for their needs. So it's really tied to their licensing scheme, and the fact that they need to clear the road, so to speak, to try to nullify any concerns that there might be any allocation issues with respect to sewer and water.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And so is this I haven't heard this before, Director Spagnell. So is this an unusual request, or is this more commonplace than I'm aware of?
Director Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through to Councillor Moore. The township has over the years received similar requests for sewer allocation and for that allocation to be allocated. Councillor Garwood's motion essentially puts a 2-year time frame on that. That is consistent with previous resolutions of council. Just because the idea is that if that allocation is provided, if it's not utilized within that 2 years, it should be utilized by another development where they are going to move forward and construct something and follow through with what they're intending to do.
Okay. Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through yourself to Director Spagnell. And just to confirm, Revere does have a short timeline and window on this. Is that correct for that licensing process? I believe the date was August of 23. I believe that's the timeline. I could be wrong on that, but if you could confirm, that'd be great.
Director Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through to Councillor Garwood. I know they do have a real tight timeline in that as far as the allocation goes, they needed to confirm that capacity was available. I want to say it was a lot sooner than that. It was within the next month or so that they needed confirmation of that. If they did not have confirmation that the allocation was available, they were going to have to pull back from the project, is my understanding, and that's based on their inability to lock down their licensing.
Thank you, Director Spagnell. Okay, Council, we have an amendment put forward by Councillor Garwood to provide allocation to the project. All those in favor? And that has carried, and we will move back to the main motion that the report items listed herein, the status of the Elmville wastewater treatment plant reserve capacity allocation as amended. Are there any further comments or questions on the main motion now? And seeing none, all those in favor? And that has carried. And moving on to verbal reports, I will turn to General Manager Ramdeo for an update on our developments.
Good evening, Mayor Coughlin, Deputy Mayor Cabral, members of council. Actually, I have nothing new to update you on this week, unless you've got questions on any of the developments.
Seeing none at this point, I can move to Deputy Cabral for our county update.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And I have to be honest with you, what I recall from the last one was budget. And it was a budget that was discussed at length. However, the previous county council had recommended the budget go forward. Although there were a couple of councillors who did make mention of a few items that will be reviewed again at a later date, but outside of the budget for the next, I think the next meeting is when it's going to be rediscussed and approved. That's pretty much it. Does that work?
That works great.
Because I totally forgot what happened there, to be honest with you.
It was riveting. And that was the second time I had sat through that the pre-recorded presentation. So the general man, they all do pre-recorded for each department. So we saw it once and then I got to see it again. Interesting. You and yes, Deputy Mayor Cabral, I don't know whether he chose to be physically there. I did not see the virtual aspect of it. So he and Warden Clark were in the chamber, just the two of them. So it was a very intimate experience for Deputy Cabral, I'm sure. Members of council, are there any municipal updates at this time? Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Two municipal updates. One, this is quite a ways in advance, but Hillsdale will be hosting its second annual vendor market on Saturday, June 10th. So way out there. However, they are looking for vendors if there are any vendors interested. And it is a very, very low vendor fee because they're just building on this. So if there are vendors interested, I would encourage you to reach out. And then the second item would be that the Phelpston CRA will be hosting its second annual Skip COVID years snow pitch tournament on Saturday, February 4th for anyone interested in putting in a team or joining a team. It will go forward rain or sorry, not rain, snow or no snow. And it's a lot of fun. It's not necessarily, it's a baseball game with bring whatever you can bring to the field to catch. I personally brought a fishing net last time and caught a ball with it, which I was pretty happy about. So if anyone is interested, please reach out. It is a lot of fun.
Councillor Garwood.
Before I provide my update, I feel like council needs to put in a team. I think that would be kind of fun. Anyway, just a couple items I wanted to mention. The first one being the return of the Elmville Maple Syrup Festival, which I know is a fan favorite in Springwater. The Maple Syrup Festival will return April the 29th. Again, there'll be some exciting changes to the Maple Syrup Festival this year. So please come on out and enjoy our local maple syrup and the many incredible producers and vendors that will be there. The next update I wanted to mention was the Elmville CRA. We will be hosting our very first, or the revitalization of the Elmville CRA meeting sometime in February, a date to be determined. But again, we're excited to launch the CRA, and I know there's a lot of community members that are excited and eager to join and participate. So if anyone watching or out there is interested in joining, please feel free to reach out. Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Could you please explain to everyone what CRA stands for?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great thing I should do. Community Recreation Associations. So very similar to what Midhurst and many other communities do so well in Springwater. We thought, why not? So let's do the same thing. And my last item that I wanted to mention was the welcome to Elmville sign. I am going to put either General Manager Ramdeo or Manager Dean on the spot here. I'm sure there's not an official update, but I know lots of community members and residents are interested and eager to learn about when our sign will be turned on, when the old one will be removed. And it's an exciting new addition to the entrance of Elmville. So GM Ramdeo or Manager Dean.
Manager Dean, if you could provide us with an update, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through yourself to Councillor Garwood and the rest of the council and the residents. So our welcome to Elmville sign, the structure is physically in place as you enter Elmville. And as you'll notice, the old welcome to Springwater sign, the maple syrup sign, is also still currently in place. So we are working with the contractor who is working with Hydro One diligently every week with my prompts and their prompts to have a final date for the hydro installation. So with the new sign, there is a new hydro draw that needs to come across the road and a new controller box put in place. So that is what currently we are waiting for the final scheduled date for. The contractor is currently working right now with an electrician to see if they can temporarily pull power from the old sign to power up the new sign. The old sign will be removed once the new sign is operational, and that way there is still an opportunity for residents to be able to message on the current sign prior to our new digital sign being in place.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. And I don't know where this one should be directed, but there's in fact 2 older signs on that stretch. There's the one that's being replaced. And I really don't know if the other one has been addressed in any way, shape, or form, but if it has by staff, I would be interested in knowing what's going to happen with that one.
All right. If you would like to.
Okay, perfect.
She's like, I'm on screen still. Obviously, I have a comment. Manager Dean.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Garwood probably has a similar comment, but this past week at the Elmville Maple Syrup meeting, the old Elmville Maple Syrup welcome to Springwater signs were addressed. So the one coming into Elmville from the Orr Lake end is actually not currently standing anymore, and it will be removed. And the other one is by the car wash and CarQuest coming in from the Wasaga end. It will also be removed when the team gets out and able to remove it, and they will be kept by keepsakes by the Maple Syrup Festival Committee, but they will be removed.
Thank you. Are there any other community updates at this time? Okay, moving on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor Garwood, I'm going to give it to you. Councillor Garwood.
This notice of motion is more along the lines for the next meeting. Is this an okay time to discuss that?
There's no discussion on notice of motion. You would simply be notifying council that you will be bringing something forward, and it would form part of the agenda package.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So yes, I will be bringing forward a notice of motion at the next regular meeting of council. The ask is going to be to implement enhanced sound abatement and privacy around the splash pad in Homer Barrett Park, and to plant evergreen trees along the fence line near the play structure and the splash pad. There are currently funds set aside in a reserve fund titled Homer Barrett Park Improvements totaling $70,000, and I'm requesting that we use these funds. Thank you.
Are there any other further notices of motion? And as I do have one, I will now be passing the chair to Deputy Cabral so that he can ask if anybody has any notices of motion.
Officially. Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. Does anyone else have any notices of motion? There you go. Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Deputy Cabral. It was brought to my attention recently that during the composition of committees and committees of council, it was brought to my attention that there was an application that was unfortunately missed and was not considered by council. Therefore, I would like to ask council's indulgence to amend the terms of reference for said committee to ensure that this member, who I believe brings brings a lot to the table for this committee. So I would just hope that we can amend the terms of reference to include this member as well.
Thank you very much. I'll turn the chair back to you, Mayor Coughlin.
And thank you. Are there any further notices of motion? And seeing none, do we have any items for future consideration? All right, at this time, then I'll move to number 14 for our bylaws. May I have a mover and seconder for the approval of the bylaws? Deputy Mayor Cabral, Councillor Moore, that bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. 2023-005 interim tax levy bylaw. 2023-006 borrowing bylaw. 2023-007 road naming D Hickling. 2023-008 road naming Thompson lands. All those in favor? That has carried. May I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw, please? Councillors Thompson and Moore, that bylaw 2023-009 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on January 18th, 2023, listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And adjournment. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the meeting, please? Councillors Garwood and Fisher, that the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 7:50 PM to meet again in a regular meeting on February 1st, 2023 at 6:30 PM. All those in favor? And that is carried. Have a great night.